Fortnite has had hundreds of named locations in its history, but unfortunately there are some that just stick out as being horrible. In this video, we're going to take a look at what I believe to be some of Fortnite's worst named locations of all time. Just those POIs that you would never drop at ever again. With that being said, let's get right into it. In my video I uploaded yesterday about some of Fortnite's best POIs, I talked about Paradise Palms, but a couple of you may remember in Season X when Paradise Palms became Moisty Palms. All funny names aside, Moisty Palms was essentially a combination of what it sounds like, Moisty Mire and Paradise Palms. And people were actually very excited for Moisty Mire to come back. You had the prison and it was looking good. The only problem about this was they decided to add a little quirk where every time you crouched, you would turn into a prop. As soon as you entered that rift zone, as soon as you press crouch, you would turn into whatever, a tree, a table, a chair, it didn't matter. This is just so stupid for a number of reasons, and trust me, I'm all about fun and having a good time, but this just crosses the line in my opinion. Crouching is a fundamental part of Fortnite. It's a fundamental part of really everything that goes on in Fortnite, especially when you're shooting your weapon, right, to get less bloom. But of course, when you're in here, you're not really thinking about like crouching. It's not something that like you think about doing, right? You just do it. But in this, you got penalized for doing that. When you went to Moisty Palms, you got penalized for crouching. This is just such a terrible idea. I can't even wrap my head around the fact that this even happened. And of course, there are some other really bad Season X POIs, but this one, in my opinion, just takes the cake for being awful. It's a unique idea, but if they had binded it to maybe a different function, like, I don't know, something else other than one of the main forms of movement in the game, it would be fine. But for me, the crouching and turning into a prop totally ruined Moisty Palms for me. Cool idea, terrible execution. Next, I think I'm going to catch some slack for this one, but again, just hear me out here. This is going to be Dusty Depot. And no, I'm not talking about Dusty Divot. Dusty Divot was pretty good, and that's a whole different story. I'm talking about the OG Dusty Depot, the three big container barns, however you want to look at it, right in the middle of the map. It is such an integral part for the storyline and such an important location in Fortnite history, but guys, let's be honest. I mean, it is not a good POI to land at. The only argument I can see being made for this named location is just that, its location. It's right in the middle of the map. You could land there and rotate Salty, you could rotate Retail, you could go anywhere. But other than that, you had very minimal chests. I mean, I'm thinking like under 10 chests. There are plenty of other named locations with more chests, and again, since you are in the middle of the map, get ready to be third-partied all the time. While it is such a core part of OG Fortnite and its storyline, I just can't put it any higher. I don't think it is a good POI. Next, I'm going to put another one that's going to piss some people off. That's going to be Coral Castle. Hear me out on this because I love the Coral Chorus just as much as the next person. That whole little thing that's been in the game for years now is so cool, so unique, so fun. I love the Coral Chorus, the Coral Buddies, all that is so cool. But this POI kind of sucks. There is a ton of hype when this POI launched. You have to remember, this was supposed to be the Atlantis POI. This was supposed to be the big, huge home of Aquaman. And in my opinion, this location did not meet the expectations or hype at all. And I remember it being a pretty big letdown when it came out. It's a huge, open, spread out POI all the way in the corner of the map. So if you land here, get ready to run to zone. You can loot here for maybe a minute before you go to zone. And my main problem with Coral Castle is just the chests are so spread out. Like, for example, yesterday we looked at Faulty Splits, and that's an example of a POI that's very small, very contained with a lot of chests in that small area. But Coral Castle is the opposite. It's a big, huge POI, and the chests are just spread out everywhere, making it a pain to loot. Oftentimes, there was very little foot traffic to Coral Castle, so you maybe come out of here killing 2-3 people, but you know, for me, that personally was not for me. I didn't enjoy it, and I think it's one of the worst locations of all time. Following that up, we have an OG POI. That's going to be Haunted Hills. And I'm sure you're kind of seeing a trend here with some of these locations, and that being that where they are on the map is really important, and Haunted Hills is an example of having a terrible location on the map. You really could not go any further to the edge of the map than Haunted Hills. Maybe you could make the argument for Snobby Shores or Junk Junction, but it was literally literally on the edge of the map. And there are very, very few named locations on the very edge of the map that stick out as being very good. Off the top of my head, like the Rig, the Shark, Paradise, I guess, is kind of on the end, but most of the time, those POIs on the edge of the map are not good. And that's just because it's so out of the way. You don't really get any foot traffic rotating into there, and typically the zone is not going to be there, so you're going to have to shorten the amount of time to loot because you're going to have to run halfway across the map to zone. The one thing I will say about Haunted Hills is its location in terms of where it is next to Pleasant Park. It is basically 20 footsteps away from Pleasant Park, so you very much so could land Haunted, loot for 30 seconds, and go into the action at Pleasant Park. It's basically like you landed there. And I know there is like a little cult fan club of people that love Haunted Hills, but for me personally, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It's such a small POI with very, very minimal chests once again. The theming is really good, but for me, it was either between Junk Junction and Haunted Hills, and I think Haunted Hills is worse. Next, I kind of have a little bit of a cheat pick here. It's going to be a mixture of 3 picks, and that's all of the brand new Chapter 2 Season 6 POIs, that being the Spire, Bony Burbs, and Colossal Crops. Look, Chapter 2 Season 6, in my opinion, was an absolute dumpster fire of a season, and these new POIs did not help that. First, the Spire I really disliked because of how vertical that POI played. If you look at the Spire, it's kind of a pain to loot because it's just zip lines that just keep going up and up and up and up. It's not just like on a flat area. And to me, this made for some pretty annoying gunfights, right? And I also didn't think that the Spire boss that was there was all that good. But what I will tell you is she had a ton of health and was very strong. But, you know, post the Mythic Primal Shotgun being OP was not very good at all and didn't really benefit anything from killing her. I really am not a fan of the Spire. And in terms of Bony Burbs and Colossal Crops, if I remember correctly, Bony Burbs was like trying to be a Tilted Towers remake, but kind of like a primal rundown version. In my opinion, it just didn't work and not many people landed at these POIs. So I apologize if these are some of your favorites, but for me, I would love to never see these ever come back. I didn't even land at these one time. I could not get behind the POIs. And finally, we have Holly Hatchery, specifically the one from Chapter 2, Season 7. Now, if you remember, this used to be Holly Hedges, and I actually enjoyed Holly Hedges. I felt like it was kind of like a remake of Greasy Groves in a sense. Holly Hedges was a really good POI. The problem for me was in Chapter 2, Season 7, when they decided to make Holly Hedges Holly Hatchery. And if you remember, each building was now surrounded in an anti-gravity like alien nanite type thing. The gameplay might not show it, but I promise you I'm telling the truth. Every single building at Holly Hatchery was 0 gravity. And I understand that it makes sense for the storyline and the whole alien theme, right? But in my opinion, just being practical here, it did not work at all. I mean, how do you fight in a 0 gravity area? You literally were just hovering. In my opinion, this is just another example of one of those ideas that, while cool and unique, don't really fit in practice. I'm sure there's many people here who didn't even know that Holly Hatchery even existed. This is a location that if it ever came back, it would be too soon, if you get what I'm saying. I rarely dropped here, and while I loved Holly Hedges, Holly Hatchery just did not do it for me. So guys, that's it. Those are my picks for some of Fortnite's worst named locations of all time. Now, of course, as I said in the intro, there are hundreds of named locations, and trust me, there are tens more that are just awful. So I could 100% make a part 2 to this list if you would like to see that. But make sure you like, comment, subscribe if you like to see this content and you would like to see more of it. But with all that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.